A couple of things spring to mind. My first ever big break in mixing is probably a significant moment for me in my mixing career. When I decided I wanted to move away from making the records and into mixing the records, although I still write and mix, you know, alongside each other, but it's predominantly mixing now. But when I decided to make this move, one of my first jobs that my management managed to get in for me was with Tinie Tempah's album Discovery, and I was pitted against 2 or 3 other big engineers in the States to mix Written in the Stars. So yeah, that's obviously a proud moment for me, because I did it. I was sort of fairly fresh off the blocks. I'd come out of the making a lot of house music, so I think bottom end wasn't an issue for me, because I know I've been doing that for years, making big house records. So kind of moving into the urban scene was quite a natural progression. But so I mixed Written in the Stars. They all went away and said, we like it, yeah, but you know, maybe we'll... There's always this thing, if someone's got a bigger name, it always helps get that mix over the line. So initially I was told that it was going with this big US mixer, whose name which will remain unmentioned. And then they did a video shoot, and in that video shoot they put all 3 mixes on as a blind test, and they chose mine. And then, so that obviously led to doing the rest of the album, and then that became quite a big album, which then sort of built my career, you know, from that stage onwards, really, as a mixer. So yeah, that's a big moment for me. I think the other thing that I'm super proud of is I've been with BTS, you know, the K-pop band, from the beginning, always mixed their singles, and I've seen them come from literally nothing to the biggest band in the world now. And it's a big challenge as a mixer, you know, when you're looking at 250 to 300 parts, at first you think your head's going to explode, and it takes a lot of good prep work. You know, I have to credit my assistant James Cunningham, who's been brilliant at, you know, getting the mix ready for me. But even so, I'm still stepping into 250 stems that have been brought down from 300. So it's still a big head space to fill, and it's certainly not a 4-hour or even a day's mix. It's, you know, 2 days of solid concentration and grafting. But, you know, I think that's good. I think it's good to be challenged and to have your boundaries pushed. And then, you know, it's always quite nice when you step back out of that into a 30 or 40 stem mix. You're like, well, I think I can just about cope with this. So yeah, it's good. Do you know what? The honest answer is I'm not sure, because I never heard the other mixes. So I don't know what it is that I did. I know that they liked how I did all the beats in the bottom end. And as I said, that again is me coming from a dance background. I knew how to make drums and bass big. And, you know, that's essentially what they want in an urban, you know, especially in the mixes I did for Tinie, they wanted that kind of big, warm bottom end. So I think that probably helped. I've found, and I think it's a British and American thing. So, you know, British mixers tend to have more sort of low, super lows and warmth, whereas the Americans have got more sort of low mids and scooped it, sort of rolled it off a bit, so they can get it louder, but it won't be as warm. So I think that's, you know, there used to be quite a big difference between, you know, British and American mixers. I think that's changed a bit now, and it's a bit more of a sort of a even spread of people that do both, and I certainly do both now, depending on what is required of a mix. You know, if it's to really stand out on radio, like this track I've just done for another artist called Marcus McCohen, we did a track called Hair Down, and I would say that's quite a US style mix, because I just wanted it to punch on the radio, and to do that you need to sacrifice a bit of the low end, but you really get the, you know, the low mids and upwards knocking through. Studio setup is quite basic, really. A few keyboards, you know, as I still write and produce for artists, so essentially, you know, I have a few keyboards. I have a mixing desk, but it's really a control unit that will allow me to send out to various outboard compressors. Like I've got the Phoenix Mastering Plus, which is an amazing compressor. You know, when I'm doing more band-based stuff, I can sometimes mix through that. My DAW is Studio One, which I've been on for the last 2 or 3 years. I absolutely love. It's very quick workflow. So yeah, my main my main speaker that I mix on is the keys. I've had them for about a year, and they literally blew my socks off when I heard them. I'm incredible. Designed by a very clever man who, they made a sealed. Essentially, they're a bit like Barefoots. They're a sealed cabinet with subs built into them, but through his DSP technology, he's managed to get a lot of the bass impetus coming forward from the speaker rather than getting reflections off the back wall. So they're brilliant for any room. I mean, I've had this room acoustically treated, but even so, they're great, and they have phase correction technology within them, which means I have a very accurate and pretty balanced listening experience. Great speakers. And then you've got the classic Avantone, which was based on the original Oratone, which is an amazing little speaker. When you want to give your ears a break, you want to check all the balances. Brilliant speaker. I think a lot of the Thriller was mixed on the Oratone speaker. So, I mean, that speaks volumes. I don't think you need to say much more than that. I think my strongest skill is experience. When you mix records, it takes years and years and years of just practice. And actually, the reason I say experience is because when I started out, I'd listen to a demo that I got in and I'd go, sounds rubbish. I'll do what I think is right. And I used to put a lot more of my own stamp on something, which is right in certain situations. But generally, when you've got a demo, people have thought about it for a long time. And there's a reason it sounds like that, because they want it to. So the biggest thing I think to take away, and an upcoming mix engineer should understand, is speaking to everyone that has a say in the record and understanding where everyone's head is at before you start mixing it. And I think that will give you a lot of strength going into the mix to know exactly where it is, because you might hear something that you think is wrong, but they go, we love it, we just want it tidying up, in which case you've got to go very lightly and you've just got to clear up unnecessary bottom end, all the usual things that you do when you're mixing a record, making space for all the instruments, checking that all the panning is right, again, it comes into the making space, thing, and cleaning up. There's so much of a good mix is led by the prep and how well the prep is done. And I usually, when I work with my assistant over the years, I build them with a basic prep, and they start and they do more and more, and if they can get that into their head, it just leads into such a good place to mix the record. By prep, I don't just mean colouring it all and putting it in the right place. I mean, making sure that if it's live drums, that their phase, there's no phase issues, cutting out unnecessary noise, cutting out breaths from backing vocals that are going to be compressed and make the track ugly. All of those little things all together add to a lot. And actually, you can often do a prep and you listen to it against a demo and it's already in a better place and you've hardly done anything in terms of EQing. So yeah, super important. Bounce Boss has been amazing. The thing I'm most annoyed about is that I didn't do it myself, because it's such a brilliant idea, and for years I have needed something like this just to streamline my workflow. I used to use SoundCloud to sort of try and get what Bounce Boss did, but it got nowhere near. Sound quality was no good. It just didn't work proficiently. So when Bounce Boss came along, I was like, this is absolutely brilliant. It's exactly what I need, especially from an organizational point of view. If I'm working on an EP or an album, you've got to take in consideration that across that there's going to be loads of different producers, there's going to be all the different A&Rs, there's going to be the management, and then there's going to be the artist. Now, sometimes just one person has views, but sometimes it's all of them have views and they all want to have their view. And in those scenarios, on one track or multiple tracks, if everyone's sending you an email from a different email address, your inbox fills up, and before you know it, you know whether you're coming or going. So what Bounce Boss does brilliantly is allows me to contain everything in one place. Contain all the feedback from all the different avenues that feedback may come from on each mix. Have all the mixes on that per album in the same place. Also, you know, obviously it speeds up massively the whole issue of, so for example, when I work with the Koreans, they're very precise in their feedback, which is brilliant. I love it. And they write timings down for all of their notes. But even then I have to, you know, then I have to get in and I have to, if the track's not lined up in the same place as their timing of their notes in the session, you've then, you know, you've got to calculate the timing difference, all those things, or have QuickTime open and do it on that. So again, it streamlines it because it, you know, you can make the notes on the point you're talking about. I can listen to it and go, yes, and go to that place in the track. So yeah, brilliant. You know, so far it's been amazing, and everyone that I've worked with on it has, yeah, been over the moon to use it.
Amazing.
The most important thing is not being fooled by volume and loudness, you know, when you use plugins. You know, you see a lot of beginners when they start out, they have like tons of plugins on a signal path, you know, and you go, why have you got all of those? And just to get it to that loudness, and then often you could take half of them off, turn it up a bit, and it sounds better than it did from sticking all of these plugins on. So I think fundamentally start with the right volume levels for everything before you start adding plugins, because if you add a plugin because the volume's too low, you're doing unnecessary processing on something that may not need it. So that's a very important part of mixing. The second thing that I think that over the last 10 years has become incredibly useful is being able to, you know, use multi-band side chaining. Incredibly good for notching out space in your mixes. You know, I use a lot of the FabFilter multi-band compressor, but I just use it solely for, I mean, not always solely, but a lot of the time I use it to notch out, for example, if I have a piano and I want the lead vocal frequencies, you know, let's say between 1 and 4K, but on just the mids to come out, the piano to come out of the way of those so they're not cluttering. So I'll put the, you know, the FabFilter multiband across the piano. I will send the vocal to the FabFilter multiband. I'll set the multiband range to mono and to that frequency, and then I'll adjust it until I know that that's out of the way. And that, you know, that's a relatively new thing that's come into plugins, and it's incredibly good at making your mixes really shine and have space, clarity. Do some research, you know, depending on the style of music that you do. Every kind of mix engineer has fortes, or certain mix engineers do. I quite like to mix different styles of music across the board, but you know, there are people that are very much more band orientated. There are people that are very much more you know, urban orientated. So find the right mixer for you, you know, and yeah, see if they've got the time to do it, and actually, you know what, actually just do some research. I think you're not always sure, you know, with a lot of the really big mix engineers, you know, you're not sure how much they're actually going to be across it, especially if you're a new artist. It might be they might have the final ears on the track. So sometimes you might be a bit better going for a, you know, not the top of the chain, a mix engineer. If you're at the bottom, you know, get someone who really will spend the time and really, you know, go into it and give it a lot of love. You know, someone who wants to prove themselves and make a point. You know, that said, you know, obviously you can't argue with the track record. Someone like Serban Ganair has had, I don't know, 1 million number ones or something. So, you know, there's that. You know, you can't argue with that. But yeah, just do research. Attention to detail, really. I have never ever been one of these people to, as I've got busier, try and squeeze in more mixes and knock out 2 or 3 in a day. My absolute fundamental principle is quality. So no matter who I'm mixing for, you know, it will be a day, unless of course it's like an acoustic track with a piano and a vocal, but it'll generally be a day, and I won't send it at the end of the day. I will sit on it, I'll come back the following day, I'll listen to it, I'll double check it myself. So I do think that you know, that's, you know, something that I do that maybe not everyone does, because they like to squeeze in as many mixes as possible, and I just think you can't keep the same level of quality up.